puedes iniciar.
Buenos días. Nuevamente les damos la bienvenida al ciclo de conferencias Arqueología Mundial, el quehacer arqueológico en otras latitudes bajo diferentes ópticas, a través del Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, la Coordinación Nacional de Arqueología y la Dirección de Estudios Arqueológicos e INATV. En esta ocasión tendremos la conferencia de la doctora Silvia Amicone titulada Pottery Technology at the Dawn of the Metal Age, a View of the Prehistoric Balkans. La doctora Amicone tiene una posición como Akademischer Rating, disculpen mi alemán, dentro del grupo de investigación de arqueometría de la Universidad de Tübingen en Alemania e investigadora honoraria del Instituto de Arqueología de la University College London, de donde es miembro de la red de investigaciones en arqueomateriales. En esta misma institución completó una investigación doctoral con financiamiento del Consejo para la Investigación en Artes y Humanidades del Reino Unido como miembro del Programa Internacional de Vanguardia titulado El auge de la metalurgia en Eurasia. Su principal campo de investigación son los materiales arqueológicos con énfasis en cerámica y pigmentos, así como las interacciones multifacéticas entre recursos, tecnología y sociedad. Su trabajo de docencia cubre diferentes aspectos de la ciencia y teoría arqueológica y lidera una serie de cursos en ciencia de materiales y cerámica arqueológica. Como analista de cerámica especializada en tecnología alfarera en contextos de intensa innovación sociocultural, ha contribuido a diversas investigaciones en los Balcanes y el Mediterráneo. Actualmente es investigadora principal del proyecto de producción cerámica en Etruria, en los albores de la urbanización, el cual pretende arrojar nuevas perspectivas en los cambios sociales que acompañan la transición hacia sociedades urbanas en la era de hierro temprana en Italia central, periodo comprendido entre finales del siglo X a mediados del siglo VII a.C. Bueno, antes de comenzar, hacemos hincapié en que la conferencia será dictada en inglés y que no es posible contar con traducción simultánea. Sin embargo, hacemos la recomendación de que activen los subtítulos en su visor o aplicación de YouTube, que son bastante buenos, ¿no? Les pedimos que formulen sus preguntas a través del chat de esta misma aplicación, YouTube, y de ser posible en inglés para poderlas transmitir de mejor manera a nuestra ponente. Sin más preámbulo, damos la bienvenida a nuestra invitada. Good night for you, Silvia. We are very excited to have you with us today with this interesting topic. You are welcome to start with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will share my screen first of all. And okay, you can see?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. First of all, I'm really grateful for this very kind invitation. I'm very happy that today I have the chance to speak with you about the work that I did when I was a PhD student in London, and then that I was also continuing as a researcher here at the University of Tübingen. Today I would like to give you an overview of my studies in Central Balkans in the period that saw the emergence of metallurgy in the area, focusing on what is happening to ceramic production when metals start to appear in this part of the world. So first of all, I would like to give you a bit of archaeological background about the area and the period. So the talk will focus especially on the material culture called Vincia. As you can see, it's a phenomenon that spread in a vast area of Central Balkans in basically the end of the 6th millennium, and then for a big part of the 5th millennium. And the name comes basically from the eponymous site, Vincia Belo Bordeaux. And why this phenomenon is particularly relevant for the prehistory of Europe? It's because in the development of this material culture, of this cultural phenomenon, we have the appearance of metallurgy at the basically beginning of the 5th millennium BC, in the so-called period that we call Gradats phase, that is normally characterized by how can you say, development in different aspects of the material culture of these sites. Here we can see on the right specific shapes that are normally associated with this phenomenon. But most importantly, it's the phase in which we have the appearance of metallurgy. And even most importantly, it's been demonstrated that this is the earliest evidence of extractive in metallurgy in this part of the world. So it's particularly relevant for the study of this phenomenon. In other words, the scientific evidence demonstrated that already at the beginning of the 5th millennium BC, these people possessed the technology to extract copper from ores containing copper oxides. But let's now go more in detail to the topic of my talk, that is not going to be about metallurgy, but is going to be about ceramic and what is happening in this period to ceramic production. So first of all, this material culture is marked by the presence of ceramic that especially marked by dark colors. So you can see here in this image, I put you an image of a typical dark varnish ware pot. But also we found the phenomenon of the use of graphite. You can see here I also put a picture of graphite and show you also the mineralogical structure of this mineral. Graphite, it's basically the material that we are using also nowadays for our pencil. And it was used in the 5th millennium BC in the Balkans to decorate ceramic. So you can see here a nice example of graphite painted pottery. And there is a let's say conventional argument that sees in a way that this kind of production, so the dark varnish ware and the graphite painted ware, might have been some kind of technological prerequisite to have and possess the pyrotechnology that then is necessary to basically smelt different kind of ores to obtain copper. And the argument was based on the idea that some archaeologists thought that these were high-fired production, so fired above 1000 degrees. And this would be a parallel with the kind of temperature that you would need to smelt copper. But we will discuss this traditional argument and why it was developed, and also if it's really something that it's real or not. More in detail, what I would like to show today are the results of the analysis, technological analysis that I carried out on 2 sites within this Vincia culture phenomenon. They are Belovode, as you can see in the central area of the development of of Vinča culture, and Pločnik. And these two sites were chosen because they are the sites they gave the best evidence also for metallurgy. So in other words, we are focusing on comparison between the pre-metallurgical phase and the post-metallurgical phase in these two sites. And we see the evolution of ceramic technology during this transition, to understand if there is a continuity, if there is a change, and also to understand if indeed there are potential pyrotechnological association that could be drawn between ceramic and metallurgy, that would also explain why in this part of the world the technology for smelting metal was developed so early. So to do so, I have a technological approach to the study of ceramic that is focusing on reconstructing some specific aspects of the production of these objects, and the let's say the theoretical background behind this approach is, of course, seeing artifacts as an expression of a complex traditional craft that is socially constructing and in continuous evolution. So looking at ceramic in this way, so not only looking at, let's say, chronotypology and decorations, but looking really also at ceramic as the outcome of a craft, we can really also study the learning networks that are responsible for, I would say, this material culture manifestation. In particular, I will focus on the routine of selection and processing of raw material and the firing procedure. I would like also to, of course, remind you how is made ceramic. Ceramic, it's made from a material that we call clay. And this material, it's a plastic material, but it's not only containing this clay minerals, so the plastic part of the material, but it's also containing material that are in a grain size of silt or sand. We will speak about that. These are the aplastic inclusions. And these aplastic inclusions can be also intentionally added. So they can be naturally occurring in your clay, but they can be also naturally added. And this is an aspect on which I will speak later, because it's very important when we reconstruct craft technology of pottery making. To do so, I, of course, will employ a science-based approach because archaeometric analyses are enabling us to have a degree of resolution on ceramic technology that it's not possible to have only on the macro scale. So I will combine the macro scale together with the micro scale to reconstruct, to have a more robust reconstruction of these aspects of ceramic technology. It's very important, as I was saying before, to understand aspects of clay selection and aspects of how this clay is selected. So it's very relevant to understand how people were orientating themselves in the landscape to select the right type of materials, because this is, of course, telling us about how people are carrying out their task and how they are visualizing from a technological point of view their environment. But also it's very important to think what is made out of this material that is collected. So how it's clean, how it's processed in different way to produce a paste, so a recipe that is going to be used to make your vessel. This is a very important aspect, as I will explain. And to do so, the best approach is to study ceramic through ceramic petrography. So in few words, we are selecting samples, as I will show later, because I will also show you my sampling strategy. We produce thin sections out of this ceramic, and we check them with a specific type of microscope called polarizing microscope that is enabling us to study the mineralogical composition of our samples. So in other words, which are the minerals that are in our ceramic, and but also technological features. So this means that we are not only studying the raw materials from a mineralogical point of view to understand, for example, provenance, but we are also studying materials from a technological point of view to understand how they are made. And this is very important because, for example, is enabling us to recognize the different type of inclusions. So what I was before saying that the material that we are using to make pots is clay, okay? And that clay, it's made of clay minerals, but clay minerals are very, very small. They are less than 2 micron. And they are not the kind of minerals that we are really observing under the polarizing microscope. What we check, what we study, are the so-called inclusions. So in the range of silt and sand. And these, as I told you, they can be naturally occurring, but they can also be added as temper. And here you can see a wide selection from Patrick Quinn book of different type of things that you can add into ceramic. So you can add rock fragments, you can add shells, you can add bone, you can add plant matter. And this is relevant because tempers are telling us something about the way in which people are approaching, of course, their landscape, but also something about their craft tradition, and of course about the function of the vessel. So there are, let's say, a variety of aspects that are determining the selection of a certain kind of temper versus another, and these are culturally significant. When we speak about firing, it's very important for me to give you some very basic knowledge about what is happening to clay when you are firing it, to make you understand how I study pyrotechnology. So I want just that you know very briefly, there are 2 main things that are happening when you are producing a pot with your paste. You have 2 types of water in this mixture. You have the mechanical water that you were probably adding while you were preparing your paste. So it's the water that you are basically adding yourself. And then we have the molecular water that it's basically part of the structure of the clay minerals. You can see here a very high magnifying picture of a clay mineral. As I told you, it's not something that we can study with a polarizing microscope, but there are other microscopes that can go in a higher degree of magnification, like the scanning electron microscope. And what is happening when we go basically beyond a certain temperature, depending on the clay mineral, we have the phenomenon of dehydroxylation. So in other words, the clay minerals are starting to decompose, and your ceramic paste is starting to vitrify. So the loss of certain kind of minerals and devitrifications are important phenomena because they are then helping you to study ceramic pyrotechnology through archaeometric techniques. And this is just an example for, I will not spend too much words on that, but these are diffractograms, they are called. This is just an example from one of my experiments of how a certain type of clay is changing mineralogically exposed to different kind of temperatures. And you can see here, this is the profile. So these peaks that you see here are representing minerals. And you can see how these peaks are disappearing or new peaks are appearing according to the firing temperature to which your material is exposed. So just to give you a very short idea, you have, for example, here a small peak of illite, so a clay mineral, that is decomposing when you are already at 800 degrees. Or here you have a peak of calcite that is gradually decomposing when you are going beyond 800 degrees. On the other hand, you have new minerals when you go, for example, beyond 900 degrees, like galenite. So in other words, there are studies that are telling us at which temperature certain kind of minerals that are typically in the clay paste used for making pottery, and when they disappear because of the firing temperature and when you have neoformation. And you can analyze your ceramic samples with this technique called X-ray diffraction. You see this machine here, reconstruct this mineralogical profile, and have a much better idea of what happened to your pot. Now, I don't want to go into complicated interpretation, but I will show you some example of how we do that. And finally, as I told you, your pot is also undergoing to this phenomenon of vitrification during the firing. And with the scanning electron microscope, we can study the vitrification. So here you can see the pictures done with this type of microscope. So this was the sherd, archaeological sherd as received. And I refired to different temperature up to the moment in which the degree of vitrification was changing. And it was around 850 degrees. Okay, so I know that this was the threshold beyond which this sample might have been fired. And here was just to show you, this is the sample refired to beyond 1000 degree. And I think even if you are not an expert in scanning electron microscopy and the degree of vitrification, you can see that there is a huge difference from the microstructure of the sample when, as received, and the microstructure of the sample, so figure H, as after has been fired to very high temperature. So this degree of vitrification is informative of the temperature at which a sample, at which a ceramic was exposed. So let's go now to our material. It was very difficult to do a sampling because I was studying material from context that they were giving really a lot of sherds. So you can imagine that in each trench we were excavating, that was 5 by 5 meter, with we found about 50,000 sherds. That means that to process this is a huge work that, of course, was done by a team, not by a single person. It was very difficult to find criteria also to represent this variability. And we were bringing together typological aspect, technological aspect, fabric aspects. So basically, with the team of pottery specialists who were working on these assemblages, to which I am very grateful, because without them would have been impossible to make this sample selection. We carried out a specimen selection that was as representative as possible. And at the end, we had 420 samples from Pločnik and 368 samples from Belovode, from which I was selecting samples from different kind of archaeometric analysis. As you can see, we were doing ceramic petrography, of course, so looking at the thin sections with polarizing microscope. We also combined that with geochemistry, so chemical analysis, to have a more robust approach. So combining mineralogical and chemical information. And the pyrotechnological study was carried out with these two techniques I showed you before, so X-ray powder diffraction and scanning electron microscope. So a mineralogical technique and a technique that is more investigating, let's say, the microstructures of samples. And everything was also combined together with an extensive geological survey. So we collected several samples around both sites because it was important to understand which were the potential sources for pottery making at these two sites, and which of them were eventually chosen and which them or not. Because also what is not selected, it's relevant. Because can tell us something about the perception of the landscape. And the decoration also is something actually I was then developing during my studies here at Tübingen, was approached with other techniques, micro XRD and micro Raman, but I will not speak about that today because it would require an entire other presentation to go in detail on these aspects. So let's now give you an overview of the results. So I will start with Belovode. So first of all, this is a geological map of the area. Basically, I found these two clay sources available around the sites. They are marked by metasedimentary rock fragments. So it's clay plus a coarse fraction, because normally this is what you find in landscape. Very rarely you can find something that is pure clay. It's clay mixed with some kind of sandy or silty and sandy fraction. And this other type of, we call it calcareous clay, because you have a certain kind of content of, let's say, calcium, normally in the form of calcite. That was marked by the presence of shells. So these are the two types of sandy clay I have. They were in close proximity to the site. So these are basically thin sections, so pictures of thin sections of briquettes that I produced from clay I collected around the site. For what concern the ceramic, so these samples were coming from a trench 18, where we have different kind of horizons that dated to different periods. The sampling was really according to features and to these horizons. So all these samples are well dated. Okay, so they cover the development, the chronological development of this site as can be reconstructed from the excavation of this trench. So they represent the different phases of the development of the Vincia material culture. And what I was noticing during the macroscopic study was the abundant presence of sherds that were burnished. So almost 50% of our assemblage was including ceramic that was burnished and made with coiling technique. And the so-called dark varnish in this site, so this, let's say, dark color ceramic, has a very homogeneous dark color. So this is implying that there is a certain kind of control during the firing that is enabling these people to produce pottery that are consistently black. And we have to discuss that also, how this was possible. Considering also that the presence of kiln in these sites is still under debate. So there is, for the moment, not clear evidence that these people were in possession of closed pyrotechnological installations. So regarding the results of ceramic petrography, so again, here we have pictures of thin sections. I found basically that there were two main fabrics. So two main, let's say, pottery recipe. One that was a non-calcareous, so without calcite, that was occurring in a coarser and finer version. And another type of recipe that was instead using this clay where you have calcitic components, also occurring in a coarser and finer version. And there seems to be a kind of loose association to different vessel function. So normally storage vessel and cooking pots have a coarser fabric, while bowls have a finer fabric. It's interesting to say that only a minority of bowls are marked by this fine fabric B, calcitic. Most likely because it was not a very good clay for this type of production. Because these vessels probably were fired to these bowls. They were fired to a slightly higher temperature. And when you have calcite in your clay and you go beyond 800 degrees, you basically have a phenomenon. I don't go too much into the details, but it's basically transforming the calcite in calcium oxide. But then during the cooling process, you have the recarbonization of the calcium oxide. And so basically, your vessel is like if they are shrinking and expanding. Okay, and often they break after that. And that's why it's not a very good type of clay, this calcareous clay with the coarser calcite, to be used for pottery that is fired above 800 degrees. Okay. We also find evidence of tempering, because the fabrics I show you until now, they were not tempered. All the inclusions that you saw were naturally occurring in this sandy clay. But we also find, especially in the earliest phase, the possible addition of aplastic inclusions. Very interesting, we find this recipe, but it's only in the earliest phase of the settlement that is marked by the addition of organic material. And some of the shirts with organic material are actually having stylistic characteristics that are not typical of Vinča, but of another phenomenon that is called starchevo, that is basically a Neolithic phenomenon that is appearing in the area before Vinča material culture. So we also found evidence of things that might not be local production, because they are completely different from a textural point of view, or they have components that are not really fitting with the local geology. So we will discuss this phenomenon because also later, because we find it also in Pločnik, what this means. So why these non-local production are found in this Neolithic site, and what they can tell us about the movement of people, about the movement of objects. So in other words, we have a very strong persistency of a pottery recipe, a Belovode. We have the use of this clay marked by calcite, let's say, from the horizon tree. But this recipe that is using this non-calcareous clay immediately available around the site starts from the very beginning and go up until the end of the occupation. And the fabric with organic tempering instead is disappearing. Then let's go now to Pločnik. So in this case, we have, so this is again the area around the site. Also in the other slide, I put this threshold. This is normally the threshold defined as the one beyond which normally potters or people who are making pottery wouldn't go to collect raw material. And in this, within this threshold, we find a very good clay marked by sedimentary rocks. So it's a clay plus sedimentary rocks naturally occurring. And we found also a source of potential tempers in, we have not very far from the site, mica schist. And of course, we have also sedimentary rocks that are occurring in these formations all around the site. So here we sampled 3 trenches, the trenches that were giving evidence also for metal objects. And again, we were really representing different horizons, different phases, different features. And in this case, I also saw a very similar development that in comparison to Belovode, with this massive use of burnishing. But this is completely decreasing in the last phase of the settlement. So only 55% of pottery is burnished. Coiling technique, and also somehow the atmosphere in this case is a little bit less controlled, because the dark varnish ceramic, very often it's not homogeneously dark. So this means that probably there is a bit less control in the firing atmosphere, so in the amount of oxygen that there is during the firing. And very interesting, here we have basically one huge fabric. So that we have this paste recipe that we found in all the phases associated to any kind of pot. And it's basically a recipe marked by the presence of naturally occurring inclusions of sedimentary rock. So most likely, I would say the potters were selecting this clay that was immediately available in this sedimentary formation close to the site. And that was minimally processed because it was probably clay that was already adequate for pottery making without doing too much effort. And as I told you, there is no strict relation between shape and fabric. So in Belovode, we don't have a strict relation, but we have tendency. In Pločnik, this fabric is really marking all the type of vessel that you can imagine. And it's absolutely unclear if tempering, so the addition of a plastic material, was used. On the other hand, we have also a much bigger number of what we call loners. So fabrics that are represented only by one or two samples, and they are not necessarily fitting also with the local geology. And one particularly, I would like to raise your attention on this fabric B. That is marked, in this case, we know that it's from the, let's say, grain size distribution. We know that these fragment of rocks that are mica schist were added as intentional tempers, okay? So at a certain point, especially in this last phase of the settlement, people are starting to use this new recipe with the addition of mica schist, while all the other things that you can see here might really represent, as I will speak in a few minutes, things that are coming from nearby villages. Apart from these two fabrics that are made with calcareous clay, that it's not used for pottery making, but it's used to make loom weights. So loom weights are made with a completely different kind of clay source in comparison to pottery. And here you can see the geological map, and you can see, for example, that this fabric with amphibole, with the fabric that I showed you before with the great abundance of amphibole could come potentially from this area. So from, for example, would be compatible with productions of this other village, Macina. The same, the fabric with serpentinite. And this one is a fabric with volcanic rocks. So in other words, we have around the site of Pločnik a huge variability of geology with rocks of different type of metamorphic rock, different type of volcanic sedimentary rock. And this is enabling us to have a much better degree of resolution in potential non-local production reaching the site. And since we know also from archaeological surveys that there were Neolithic villages in the area, it's very likely that these vessels could have come from these villages, and telling us something about connections between these different settlements. Again, in this site, there is a huge continuity of pottery tradition with this fabric A with sedimentary rocks that is found across all the phases. But in the last phase of the settlement, we have, so most of these loners that I show you are especially connected to the last phase of the settlement. And also we have this fabric B, the one with mica schist, that is starting to appear in great numbers in this last phase. So now a very short overview of the firing problem. So you remember that I started the talk speaking about dark varnish ware or dark varnish ware decorated with graphite, considered to be a high-fired production. I analyzed, now I would say, because I went, I move on from my PhD to analyze also ceramic from the same period, dark varnish from more or less a vast area of the Balkans. I have never found anything that was beyond 900 degrees, never, unless was coming from a destruction layer. Okay, so this means that it's a secondary firing, not the original firing temperature. And why I can say that, if you remember, we spoke about clay minerals, and in all my samples, I have illite. So this is the peak that is showing me that I still have some illite within my samples. And the illite is decomposing around 900 degrees. Of course, it depends, depends a lot on when a mineral is disappearing. It's not only related to the firing temperature, it's also related for example, for how long a certain kind of temperature is kept. It's also related to the atmosphere. It's also related to the general composition of your pot, but tendentially at 900 degrees, you don't have any more illite. And this means that these are definitely not fired beyond 1000 degrees. And we can see this also from the degree of vitrification. So no one of the shards I analyzed were showing was showing this what we call the continuous vitrification that would correspond to temperature beyond 1000 degrees. And you can see here how it looks like continuous vitrification. So here it's the comparison that show you that really this pottery, it's not fired beyond 1000 degrees. The same, it's the graphite decorated ceramic. Also, in this case, I found illite, and not only illite. Sometimes I even found chlorite that is decomposing even to lower temperature, 700 degrees. And again, the microstructure is absolutely not compatible with anything that is around 1000 degrees. So let's say that we can also discuss this later. It's clear that this interpretation that saw this type of ceramic fired to very high temperature was a little bit forced and was not really scientifically supported by analysis. And I would say also from a perspective of a potter, why to fire this type of clay to temperature above 1000 degrees? You can have a perfectly nice and usable pot using a temperature between 700 and 900 degrees. Actually, I would say that this type of clay, illitic clay, fired temperature beyond 1000 degrees are basically not really giving you a usable pot, because the structure of the ceramic is going to destroy. You know, if you want to produce high-fired ceramic, you would need to use specific type of clay, refractory clays, okay? And this is definitely not a refractory clay. So the last thing I wanted to say before going to the conclusions, it's that I also found very interesting this aspect of the graphite decorated ceramic. Then I was having the possibility in Tübingen to study a little bit deeper. But here I would just to spend a few words. First of all, one question that I was having when I started the project was if it was really graphite. So if this shiny silver pigment was really graphite. And I approached this problem using the Raman technique, that it's a technique that is perfect for studying different type of pigments, but especially carbon-based pigments. And this is how natural graphite collected in natural deposits looks like. Okay, so we have these two bands and this sharp band that is typical spectrum of well-crystalline graphite that can be only natural. So, of course, nowadays we can produce synthetic graphite, But these people in the 5th millennium, they didn't possess the technology to produce graphite. Okay, so this means that these people were definitely collecting graphite from natural deposits and then using it as a pigment applied to ceramic before firing. And the firing process basically was enabling the pigment to synthesize, let's say, in a way, to the ceramic body and becoming a permanent decoration. If you don't fire your pot and you apply the graphite decoration after, it won't be durable. But on the other hand, during the firing process, there was another pigment that was produced, and this is a synthetic pigment in a way. There is carbon black. So the black color in the pot, it's carbon black, and you see it's marked by these two broad bands here. And we have basically both of them. Something that was applied before firing, that was natural graphite, and something that was forming during the firing because of the smoking process, that is carbon black. And this is a very, if you think about that, very sophisticated technology, right? It's implying knowledge of raw materials, but also how to fire them so that you can achieve a successful decoration. And even more remarkable for me was that I found a shirt that was not decorated with natural graphite. So it looks like a graphite decoration, but when we analyze it with Raman, we saw that it was a carbon-on-carbon decoration. That in a way, it's even more remarkable from a technological point of view. So this means that no matter if these people were able to achieve a very high temperature, that, as I say, it's not really something so relevant when producing earthenware with a non-refractory clay, but they were definitely able to produce a very sophisticated type of decorations that were implying really knowledge of raw materials, where to collect them, how to manipulate them, and how to use a fire to make them a durable decoration. So, concluding, what we, in this like journey across the Central Balkans during the 5th millennium BC, I was observing a strong persistence in the transmission of the pottery residue. Also nowadays, I analyzed other sites, and I can tell you that you have always this pattern. So that is telling us that these sites were having stable learning networks. So if you think about a site like Pločnik, we have a development over 1,000 years. So we are speaking really about very long processes. And it's true that we have different approaches in the selection and processing of raw material, and also in the way in which people are perceiving how they have to produce a certain kind of recipe in relation to the function of the vessel or in relation to the shape. But once how can I say, when these communities were choosing a certain kind of approach, they were persisting in this kind of approach. So I have let's say, I notice differences among different sites labeled as Vincha culture sites, but within the site itself, there is a very stable tradition. Of course, these different regional traditions can be connected to different production contexts, to different community of practice. The other thing that was interesting is that there was no drastic change with the appearance of metallurgy. So during the so-called Gradats phase, technology is, from a ceramic point of view, is absolutely stable. So we saw a development in Pločnik well after metallurgy appeared to the site. So the metallurgy is in this area is basically appearing around the beginning of the 5th millennium. And this shift that we see in the site of Pločnik was happening something like 500 years after. So this is only to say that what is my interpretation right now is that, of course, it's important and relevant the appearance of a new material in these communities, but probably at the beginning was not really triggering a huge social change, or at least this is not reflected within ceramic technology. While this last phase in Pločnik could be the results of a social reconfiguration, and so the start of the real, let's say, Chalcolithic Copper Age transition. But this is, of course, also a theoretical problem that we might discuss, what is really making a Copper Age or Chalcolithic as such, if it's the appearance of metallurgy or it's a social development, okay? And finally, regarding this problem of firing temperatures, as you already understood, for me, it's not relevant to consider the firing temperature as a parameter to defining the skill of these potters, because the temperature that were employed, around 750, 800 degrees, are perfect temperature for the type of clay that was used. And it wouldn't make any sense to try to fire this type of ceramic to higher temperature. So I wouldn't say that these potters were not able to achieve a firing temperature higher than 800 degrees. I would say that they were not interested in doing that. And I think that this overestimation of ceramic firing temperature was connected to this desire to link the two crafts, so metallurgy and ceramic, without thinking that at the end of the day, what is really linking these two technologies is not the firing temperature, but rather the ability to control fire, to control the atmosphere, because smelting copper is not just about reaching temperature above 1000 degrees, but it's also about having the right redox conditions. So also nowadays, we know, for example, that the appearance of graphite, it's broadly contemporaneous, graphite painted pottery, to the appearance of metallurgy. So maybe, you know, it's not that one technology was the precursor of the other, but they might be related technology. And I would say that they tell us something about the knowledge that these people have of raw materials, about firing processes, and the ability basically to manipulate this raw material to produce complex materials. And so not only metal, but also complex decorations. Of course, we can discuss that in more detail later. But now I would like to thank you for your attention. And of course, I would like to thank all the team of the project, Rise of Metallurgy in Eurasia. And if you are interested in reading more about the project, there is an open access, very well done monography book available, as I say, online, where you can find much more details of what I was trying to condense in a little bit less than an hour today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silvia. Wow, what an extraordinary presentation. I have lots of notes, and I don't know where can I start asking. It is amazing the range of information that we can obtain from this archaeometric analysis. It is surprising all the technological sophistication that production of pottery involves. I know that here we have a lot of colleagues that are working with archaeometry with pottery, but I don't know if they work with this range of all this kind of analysis, because you are even demolishing some myths or assumptions that everybody, or that, for example, in the Vincha culture, were about the firing of the pottery. And I in one of your papers, you talk about anthropology of technology, and that's what you are doing, because you consider the aspects about all the chain operatoire, how they collect the raw material, how they transform even the clay with the temper, and if these are elections of cultural elections, or they are because it's only the raw material they have on hand, and so they elect this, for example, the temper, but probably they are cultural elections, as you are exposing here. So, well, it is very interesting, the concept of the transmission of recipes, because we always assume that changes in production involves technological or evolutionist aspects, but you are saying that they are not even interested in changing those recipes in a lot of time, and they keep these recipes, and they are in a network to transmission of these recipes, and it is very interesting. So I really liked your presentation. It is a very interesting point of view. I want to ask this. I understood this is the beginning of specialization of the pottery production. It is a domestic production. They don't have specialized places to. It is a domestic production. They don't have specialized places. I understood that they don't have pyrotechnical installations for the production of the pottery.
I can comment on that if you wish, because there is an ongoing debate about that.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's better if yeah. So basically, the problem is always to define what is specialization. So let's say if we have a very broad definition, I would say it means that the number of the producer are fewer in comparison of let's say the number of people that are using pots. Okay, this is a very vague definition of specialization, but it's just to to start to give some thoughts about that. So now we don't know exactly what was the level of specialization within this community. It's true that we don't have clear evidence of stable, let's say, pyrotechnological installation, but this doesn't mean that they were not existing. Also, most of these sites were not extensively excavated. And this is a problem, of course, because also to say there are not dedicated area for pottery production in something that has been not extensively excavated might be dangerous. And for example, during the geophysic prospections of the site I was presenting today, they found some kind of anomalies that might be related to some kind of pyrotechnological installation. But we don't know that they were not excavated. So for the time being, I would say that relying on this parameter about existence of sophisticated installations for pottery firing or area that are dedicated like workshops, I cannot say anything. But for me, the existence of complex decorative technique that are implying a certain level of awareness of where to collect certain kind of raw material, and also to have some way specialized network for these raw materials, as well as sophisticated pyrotechnological technique, it's implying that some people were somehow specializing. Okay, but on which level, I don't know. So I don't know if it's a specialized household or, this is what I'm trying to say, that I can say that on the basis of these skillful techniques might be that specialists were existing, but I don't know how to, if to say to which level of specialization we are. I definitely think that pottery was not produced as a trade commodity. And for me, for example, these non-local production that I show are speaking about probably movement of people rather than movement of objects.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if these explain my point of view, but there are other people who would say, yes, Vinci ceramic is the outcome of highly specialized potters. But for me, from my point of view, there is some level of specialization, but I would not go too far to define it.
Yes, you're right. How can we define specialization? That's like one of the assumptions that or the concepts that we manage with an assumption about what specialization means. Because normally we think of workshops and some a group of people controlling the production of some product, probably lithics or ceramic or whatever, no? But you're right. Probably we have some assumptions about what we are referring or what we think about production. And it is very interesting, your point of view, because of course I think that it could be an identitarian production as well. The pottery, these shapes and the decorations. But probably I am confused about which will be the traits or the characteristics that, for example, if every site have different kind of pottery, of the way of doing pottery, how can they be identified as being a culture? I don't know if I am making myself clear.
Yeah, these are also, how can you say, culture, I would say cultural history conventions, to define this
like cultural
culture.
traits. Yes,
exactly. I mean, there are, of course, let's say that there are certain kind of traits that are making these ceramic very similar from a formal point of view. But as I was showing you, technology also highlighted that there are differences. And
yes,
definitely under this big umbrella called Vinci culture, you have different people, different community of practice with different kind of connections and the degree of similarity and differences. So I would say, I mean, there are even, in the debate about the world culture that we have in prehistoric Europe, there are even people who want to abandon it because it doesn't reflect the complexity that there is really within these communities. But on the other hand, if we use them with the right, how can you say, meaning, so as just simply as label to define something much more complex, I still think that they are a valid, how can you say, a valid concept. But definitely, I would say that especially this technological approach to the study of ceramic is showing more and more how within these concept of material culture, that things are much more complex. And we can really study a different level of proximity among people, and to understand where these similarities are related only to phenomena of imitation that do not imply a direct contact among people, and phenomena of imitations of techniques that instead imply a technological guidance, and so contact of people. But I still think that typological similarities are telling us something. It's just that we have to put them in the right level of interpretation, and to not think that cultures are equal to people, because this is the big problem of cultural history.
Yes. We have the same problem here, more or less. We have defined, for example, Mesoamerican culture. That it was a definition that was made for some stage before Spaniards or European people arrived to Mexico, and we transported the concept to all the past civilizations that we had in this territory, and they share some traits, but they are not the same, as you said, like in Vincha culture. But we have these conceptions that we have learned from academic perspectives, so it's difficult to abandon them.
Yeah, and to be honest, as long as you know how to use them correctly, I wouldn't even feel that we have to abandon them, because they are telling us something. You know what I mean? They are telling us typological development, are telling us something about chronology. They are telling us something about a common view of how an object should look like, you know? But then if we want to go really to study deep contacts among people, these how can I say tighter networks, we have really to go in the technology. But they are just different proxies from my point of view.
Yes, and the problem is that we have sometimes we banish the differences and we try to see similarities. So it's a problem. I agree that we don't have to disappear this point of view, but sometimes we abuse of this kind of concepts.
Exactly.
So yes, congratulations for your investigation. It is very interesting. We have some comments from our audience. Gabriela Trejo Rodriguez from the National Anthropology Museum of Mexico. She sends her greetings, and she says that she thinks it's a very interesting investigation, very specialized and complete, and she sends her congratulations to you. We have Harris, I think that I'm pronouncing correctly his name or her name, Harris Rosales de la Gasca. He sends his greetings from Ecuador, the Museum Salango Manabí. I don't know, you probably know him or her, but well, we have audience from Ecuador.
Okay, nice. Very nice.
Yes, but I think that are all the comments we have. Well, this was very, very, very interesting.
There was the last thing I wanted to add, only for precision, but it's very short, because you were asking me how we can assess specialization, you know. And
yes.
There are also some people, for example, studying the degree of standardization, and so you can also use this as a kind of a parameter. But I didn't, I didn't focus on this specific aspect in my studies. I was more focusing on the technological attributes. Yeah, but
probably also, technological attributes can talk about specialization because you say that they use different technological techniques in from side to side, as I understood correctly. And it is, I think, it's a cultural. Of course, it's a functional aspect, but as well, and you outline it. It's a cultural thing as well, no? So I think that we probably technical way of doing things, technological approaches can talk about specialization, but yes, you were right. How can we measure specialization?
Yes.
Probably
I mean, there is
standardization.
a huge body of literature on the topic, and I was trying also to approach it, but it was not the main focus on my work. And also, I think that this, because we were saying about this huge umbrella of Vinci culture, within this umbrella, probably there were community of practice that were having also different degree of specializations. So, you know, I don't think that we can make a conclusion that is valid for the variety of communities that we label with this kind of name.
Right, yes. And it is interesting as well the aspect of the appearance of metallurgy that it didn't change the way they they were fabricating their pottery. So it is very interesting, and you are demolishing this myth about why the if metallurgy change social dynamics, and it is the key concept to say that we have social change, and it is very interesting as well.
Yeah, I think it might be that it's triggering that, but it takes time. You know, it's not that to have 2 or 3 objects, a metal object in a community has to trigger some kind of a sudden social change. So
yes, but it is very common to, well, in classic archaeological studies to assume this. You know, the appearance of metallurgy is, as in, for example, literal writing, for example, it changed, and you can define prehistory from history, for example. It's more or less the same. Historians and archaeologists have defined this even temporal change in the yes, in the chronology and in the developing of societies. They have marked this as the importance, the appearance of metallurgy, and you are triggering this concept. Well, I think that it's another perspective.
Thank you. I mean, of course, also on this, we have an ongoing debate in prehistory of Europe. And yeah, let's say that I made my small contribution in this bigger problem. Yeah.
Well, it's another point of view, and it's you are doing some how do you say that? I'm sorry. But you are contributing to this discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Well, we don't have more questions from the audience, so I have to thank you very much for acceding to be part of these conferences. We appreciate. It was very interesting. I learned a lot reading your papers, and in the conference I had some doubts, and when you were speaking, you were answering my questions before I give them to you. So Thank you very much. We really appreciate, and we hope that we can know more about your work soon.
Yes, of course.
Okay, well, thank you, Silvia.
And thank you a lot for, again, for the kind invitation. It was a pleasure. And so I hope anyway we will keep in contact. Yeah.
Of course. Pues a nuestra audiencia, bueno, agradecemos nuevamente a la doctora Amicone y a INA TV. Nos vemos la próxima sesión, el jueves 27 a las 11 de la mañana, con el tema A Feminist Postcolonial Archaeology of the Body in Roman Period Mediterranean, que será impartida por el doctor Mauro Pudu. Hasta pronto, muchas gracias.